Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Gardenside Chats. Today we're at a pretty different garden than we are at normally. This is what we call our Crates to Plates garden. This is a garden with 500 different milk crates, which are each planted with vegetables every year. We've had this partnership with Lucky's in the past, and now Schnucks is moving into this area, opening a store that's going to be called Eat Well, and we're partnering with them to continue this project. All the produce that's raised here goes to the central pantry. So we wanted to take some time today and talk about how this garden works and how you can grow vegetables in a container at home as well. So basically what we have here is this is just a standard milk crate. You can get them for about $9, but I often see them for free at different places. I just kind of run across them, I feel like. But really you can use a bucket if you put some holes in the bottom of it, or any type of container, as long as it has some holes that allow it to drain. Now let's step up here and take a look at these containers. So milk crates, of course, they have a lot of holes. In fact, they have too many holes, so you need to put in a liner. Now this is a sort of a permeable fabric. It's I believe, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a weed barrier, is that right? Mm-hmm. It's a weed barrier fabric that we bought in pretty large rolls. But you can use other types of fabrics too. Gunny sack would work, a tarp, well, some types of tarps would work, some types aren't water permeable. Or sometimes at stores you'll even see like a square kind of felt liner that can go into a milk crate like this. But yeah, you'll want to have some kind of liner if you use a container, a milk crate like this, just to make sure the soil doesn't wash out. Now there's some benefits to having a container garden. The first one I think about is if you don't have space for an in-ground garden, if you don't have a yard where you can put in a raised bed or a tilled garden, but you might have like a porch or a deck or a driveway or something like that, where you can put some containers out. And really, in a container, you can grow most things that you would in a traditional garden. So right here we have a couple long rows of pepper plants that we're growing one per crate. These crates are 1 square foot, so it's kind of easy if you're practicing square foot gardening to use crates, because you can kind of think in terms of okay, I need to put 1 pepper per crate, or if you're planting Swiss chard, maybe you plant like 2 Swiss chards per crate. But the only things I've had more trouble with growing in crates are things like sweet potatoes. We actually have grown sweet potatoes out here, but they were kind of a chore to dig out and empty out of the crates. Things that vine a lot and grow a lot can be a little more difficult, like just depending on what the surrounding area is. Like watermelon, you probably could grow a watermelon in a crate, but it would need to have plenty of space to vine out outside of your crate. We also grow things that vine and climb, like beans and cucumbers. So that's why we've used these cattle panels here to just allow a trellis for those beans to climb up. I think, yeah, one of the other cool things about containers is you can start things indoors and then take them outdoors once it's warm enough. So if you wanted to have, like, start your tomato or something and it's a little too cold to put it out, well, you can just keep it inside by your window where it's getting sunshine, or under your lamp before taking it outside. Now, another thing to keep in mind when you're container gardening is the soil mix that you put into your containers. You want it to be pretty light and fluffy. You don't want to just get soil or dirt from your backyard or your current garden and put it in your container. It'll get really hard and compact. It can dry out and just kind of become this brick that's difficult for water to penetrate. And so most soil mixes for container gardens will contain something like peat moss or cocoa fiber or perlite or something like that kind of allow the soil to be a little more fluffy, to also hold water too, so it doesn't drain through super quick. You don't want a really sandy soil that's just going to allow the water to just drain out the minute you put it in. And so what I recommend, or the easiest thing might be to just go to a garden store and get a bag of pre-mixed potting soil that already is specifically for vegetables, that already has maybe that peat moss or cocoa fiber in there, as well as like some compost and maybe a little bit of soil nutrients that the plants are going to need. If you're making it yourself, if you're doing quite a few containers, you could always kind of assemble those materials yourself. So you could get some compost, some peat moss, maybe a little bit of topsoil, and then you would want to make sure to get some nutrients to add to, something that contains nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, as well as some of the base nutrients that plants need, like calcium and magnesium and things like that. So let's see, the second thing we should talk about is, watering is another big thing with containers. So with a traditional garden, it's on the ground, especially if it's a tilled-in garden, you can water it and walk away and the soil holds the water pretty well. Or when it rains and the ground remains wet faster. But as you can see from these crates, they have all these holes, they're up and off the ground, so they dry out really quickly. And so the key with watering with containers is just you're going to have to water more frequently. We have this system set up onto a timer, so we can program it to water 20 minutes, 4 times a day at a time. And through a little experimentation, we found that watering for shorter periods of time and more often, using that timer system helps everything or maintain like kind of a more even level of moisture throughout the day as your plants are growing. Let's see. This stuff we're using right here is our watering system. Of course, we got 500 crates here, but this is called drip tape, and it's just this plastic tube that has a little slit every 6 or so, every 6 inches, that just lets a little bit of water drip through every time. So we have all this hooked up to that timer, which then sends water through these tubes periodically and lets water kind of slowly drip into the crates. Let's see. Carrie, you got any questions or kind of additional?
I think watering, you already talked about it, but I think watering is going to be the big thing.
Yeah, watering. Some people even, I wouldn't recommend this, but you can't, if you're in an area that's not getting enough sunlight, sometimes people will move their crates halfway through the day just to kind of follow the little patch of sunlight that's kind of piercing through their shade. Well, that's another good thing to cover is your plants are going to want a minimum of 6 hours of sunlight every day. And so which is, some people overestimate that the amount of sunlight they get, but it really needs a minimum of six hours of sunlight to make sure that your plants are successful. So maybe going out every hour of a day when it's a sunny day, which hasn't happened for a while, and just checking and seeing if sun is shining in the spot that you want to plant is a smart thing to do. One of the nice things about container gardening too out here is we don't have as much weed pressure. We don't have as many weeding problems. We don't have any Bermuda grass in any of these crates. The weeds that do come up are pretty easy to pick comparatively. So that's a plus of doing containers. I think you'll want to make sure too that your containers aren't too shallow. So like sometimes you'll see like flower planters that maybe go on the railing of your deck or something like that. They're long and thin and maybe they're only about this deep. And that's okay for some things like greens, maybe lettuce does all right in there, some radishes. But for most things, you're going to want at least like a foot deep of soil to plant in, especially for any of your root crops like carrots or beets or something like that, where you're going to want that deep soil. if you're using a container that you drill a few holes into the bottom of it, like say a bucket, you'll probably want to add some small pieces of rock to the bottom of your container, just to allow the soil to drain out better from the bottom of your container. Another thing with container gardening is the nutrients kind of leach out faster from a container like this than they would through a normal garden. With the frequency that you're watering your containers, there's just more water flowing through the system and kind of carrying it out with it some of those water soluble compounds, that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And so you'll probably want to re-up on those things throughout the year to make sure that your plants have enough. I would say I like using liquid fish a lot for nitrogen. There's bone meal and phosphorus that you can also use for calcium and phosphorus needs. And we also sell some basic nutrient fertilizers from CCUA that you can use for your containers as well. Let's see. Out here we have some green onions that were planted last fall. They're still a little bit small, but they should be sizing up here in the coming month as we fertilize them a little more. After they're out of there, we'll put something else in. I think we might do beets next in those rows. Over here along this long cattle panel trellis, we have some green beans that will be popping up soon that are going to climb up onto this trellis. I like using a type of green bean called a Gita bean. It's a long Asian bean. It's about 1 foot long, and main reason being that the Japanese beetles don't like to eat it. So it's something I like planting because they don't touch it. Along those green beans, we're going to plant some beets on the other side of the crate that can also grow up as the beans grow too. After those things are done, we'll probably put in something else for the fall, maybe some head lettuce or something like that. There's always something you can plant at any point in the year. Like right now, I'm doing peppers and tomatoes, sweet potatoes, beets and carrots. I'm holding off. I'm not planting things like cilantro or lettuce. Those types of things do a lot better in the early spring and late fall, but the middle of the summer it's a little bit hard to get those started. Over here alongside these peppers, we've got carrots planted that will be coming up soon. Hop over to our other island over here. We've got some Swiss chard that will be sprouting, or actually we're bringing in transplants. We started those back at the greenhouse, and as well as some basil will be growing. Basil is another herb that can be started this time of year and loves the hot weather, and also it's a good container plant. A lot of those Mediterranean herbs kind of like the container setup because they like kind of having dry soil sometimes, so as the water flows through, your container dries out a little bit in between waterings. They don't mind that. Yeah, so that's pretty much it out here. We've got, I don't know, maybe if one of you can fit this many crates in the back of your yard, then send us a picture. That'd be exciting to see. If you guys can, just you can follow us. Well, you're probably already following us on Facebook, but if you need any type of garden-related services, contact us via our website. We build container gardens and till gardens for folks and plant fruit trees and things like that. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll be next week next Monday. Well, probably not Monday, it's Memorial Day, but probably next Wednesday. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, folks.